What's good, y'all? What up, what up, what up? It's your boy Dave B watching Beyond Astrology, and today we're gonna be breaking down what's going on with Uranus going direct, you know what I'm saying? So that is already energy that's bringing a certain vibe, you know what I'm saying, shaking things up for the most part, because Uranus always deals with rebellion, change, sporadic energy, chaotic energy. So you're gonna have this coming at you in two different angles, right? You're gonna have your internal world kind of feeling shaken up a little bit, and then you also gonna have chaotic people. Also, if we even going further, right, we see chaotic news stories. So different things like, everybody talking about the Epstein files and that information coming out. And then we also got, we still got tensions rising with ICE and different things like that. And usually, like, how I speak about events on the news and things like that, one thing we got to understand is always narratives. So you have to pay attention more so to the narratives than the emotional response that, is naturally going to be brought out. Because these are things, and it's like these are real people being affected by these types of tragedies and things like that. Um, at least that's how they frame it. And so, it's no surprise that you're gonna feel some kind of way, but you got to understand that everything. And again, one of the things he's saying with the Epstein files is like everything y'all thought was a conspiracy turned out to actually be some real shit or some true shit or point to something that's like very much a thing. And even that to a degree, it's like you gotta take everything with that grain of salt. Like you gotta kind of step back from being don't allow what's given by the government to validate you and your ability to kind of point something out, because everything is a play. Everything you got to understand, this is a game that's been going on for much longer than you probably been aware of it. Um, some of us come into this lifetime already having memories of certain things. We understand certain things without the context of or without needing to see it in real time. But like a lot of this stuff is stuff that's been going on way longer than you've been aware of it. Especially depending on what generation you in, because you know you might have picked up on it early, but you were born into a system that was already running. So, but there was a time before this, which is where you have to also understand that when you see things crumbling and when you see things falling, you can kind of breathe easy. And you also have to work and put effort towards imagining yourself outside of what society provides you as a kind of template to develop your sense of self. We're in a weird time, very potent time, very powerful time, but also very strange and uncomfortable time, right? This whole year is gonna kind of be uncomfortable. So right now, just get yourself prepared for that. Get yourself adjusted to knowing that this is not the year that you probably not gonna find your settled down version of yourself in this year. Just the nature of this year, the energy of this year, the way this year is being set up, and there's a fairy tale idea of peace and happiness of one day I'm gonna get to a point where life will make sense and this will be stable and that will be like this. And the thing about it is not to say you won't reach stability, because stability is different than the fantasy of things stopping or becoming easier. Life is going to continue to compound as far as its challenges, but don't look at it as like, okay, one day it's going to be all peaceful. Look at it as I'm learning every day how to be stronger. And the more I learn about myself, the better I can become at handling life situations. And then also preparing myself for future things in such a way where I do experience comfort or security in knowing that I've prepared myself for any given situation. Or again, still life is going to throw things at you that you can't prepare for. And these are the lessons that kind of come with Uranus. Now, Uranus is also an initiator of change. So in the area of life that you have Taurus in, right, the house you got Taurus in, that's triggering or giving you context on what how to approach that change, maybe what angle that change is coming from. When Uranus was in retrograde, it was kind of showing us, you remember it touched Gemini for a second, but then it went back. Now, I was saying when Uranus was in Gemini last year, I want to say, I was saying, hey, it's the age of bad advice. Because at that time it was like, it's funny that dance that a planet does right in the beginning of a new, at least these outer planets, they all do a little dance, right? They do a little salsa hit. They go into the new sign and then they back out. And when it dip in, that new energy, you get a glimpse of kind of like people's first impression of it, like when I say first impression, I mean how people are using it, and most of the time it's out of context. So how people are approaching it isn't actually the way that energy is supposed to be played out. It's not until the retrograde that the majority of people kind of get a new sense of what that means, because it's almost like a lot of times, the best lessons are in hindsight. So it's kind of like energetically, a lot of times it'll be like when the new energy, if it's one of those outer planets, especially, when it first gets in, people get a rush of new energy and don't know how to use it. So when Uranus was, dipped into Gemini, it was like people just was trying to get information off, but nobody was really thinking about what they were saying. People were either regurgitating a bunch of bullshit, or they were taking the advice of people who didn't know what they were talking about just because, it was new information, right? Now, when it retrograded, again, we going back to center. We had to kind of retract a lot of the things we might have tried to dip and dabble into that we realized we really didn't know about or didn't have the authority to speak on. Or we had to kind of re-examine the information that we was getting so that we can better understand where we stand in relation to it. Because Taurus is about values, and so in Gemini is about information. So in this age of information, as they say, right, social media, it makes it so that anybody can pick up a camera and just start talking. But the difference between somebody who's talking, like right now or coming up, well, I say right now, we can kind of see those who see it. We can kind of tell who is genuine because they know something and they've gone through the ins and outs, and they kind of, like when I think of Taurus, I think of like foundation, I think of consistency, I think of a certain level of like groundedness that kind of makes a person firm in, whatever it is that you're talking about, whether it's what they do, what they know, who they are, right? I kind of even understand, I look through at astrology as progression. So if you think of like your Taurus energy comes after Aries energy. So after the initial conviction and the, personal vision comes the foundation of that, or the values of that, and then also the building of the self-esteem. It's like confidence, then self-esteem, which supports what that vision is with cold, hard facts. So in this age of like information, right? At the core of this year is really centered in identity. It's a year one. We are coming out of a snake year where a lot of old ideas of ourselves have to be left behind, have to be left in the wind, basically. Not even like a thing where you're like, oh, the old me, and you're still holding on to old artifacts of the old way you used to think, or the old way you used to, the old people in your life and stuff like that. Like this is a time where it's like a clear separation. Now, not everybody's going to be able to make that kind of like leap, but those who do, you're going to get the most out of this, because the whole idea or the whole energy of the fire horse year and stuff like that is to be mobile, to be flexible. If you holding on to stuff, it's gonna slow you down. You got to think of it like that. Anything that's slowing you down is probably not for your benefit. Although there, again, we're spirits having a human experience. So part of that human experience is learning even how to let go, what to let go of, when to let go. So if saying some people gonna be trying to carry things with them that is gonna slow them down, but maybe they're okay with that. And I'm not here to tell you right or wrong. There is no real right or wrong. It's just understanding the energy and deciding for yourself how you're gonna play it, knowing who you are in relationship to where you're trying to go, and you deducing what the best route to get there is gonna be. Right now, getting back on Uranus, going into Gemini. Right now, it's just direct in Taurus. So going direct in Taurus, whenever a planet goes direct, there's a certain time that it has to catch up to where where it once was. So this is kind of like catch up time for the Uranus energy. So it's kind of like the lessons that you should have learned from the retrograde was kind of like having a certain attitude about things to know that okay, things are changing. Like Uranus going direct, it's like an acceptance. Like it has to be a radical acceptance of things are different and I must change, or I'm going to not actually make like I don't want to be, but I guess I gotta be direct about it. Like, change or die. Basically, it's kind of like that. Even though the stakes might not feel like they're that high, and within context, they're not. But when I say die, I don't mean like physically. I mean mentally. I mean like when you look at the area of life you got Taurus in, how you dealing with that gotta like transition. It's gotta change. And a lot of times people avoid change because they think it's painful, but they don't realize holding on is much more painful than just committing to what reality is showing you that everything must change. Things must transform and take new shapes and take new forms, right? So things are being shaken up, right? So Uranus also in Taurus, your values could be shaken up, your self-esteem, or the things that connect to your self-esteem through the physical means and the practicality. So that could be like your finances and stuff like that. Like, and honestly, it's like when I say shaken up, it could just simply be uncertainty. And that uncertainty is not for you to blame yourself and triple on shame about a situation that you kind of low key had no control over. It's more so about teaching you how to respond to um damn, there was another phrase I was gonna say, but it's like it's not to punish you. It is a lot of times to mold you or to show you that there are other means to do something. Usually when a door closes, if you're so concerned about that door that closed, you overlook or you miss out on the seven other doors that opened up. And again, they opened up in a way they cracked open. They might not have wide open showed you, but you have to get uh I want to use the word curious about other options. When something closes or you get rejected from something, you have to turn that maybe that, sometimes you feel some kind of way about that, right? When something is shut right in front of your face. But if you get a little curious about, well, if this isn't the way, then I wonder if there's another way. If you get curious instead of shameful, or you get curious instead of, again, wallowing in doubt, or being so attached to those expectations, a lot of times can destroy your natural curiosity, which is in a lot of ways is your superpower, right? And I'm using that word too because Gemini is the kind of energy of, that childlike curiosity to, learn something. Like Gemini is like, I always think of a kid that is learning how to, play with blocks. And so they just kind of using their hands and trying to, pick up the blocks, and it's a little clumsy, but kids like looking at it and feeling it and stuff like that. So it's kind of like that childlike curiosity that leads to you getting information about what something is, learning in a different kind of way, right? So Uranus and Gemini is kind of like, on one part, it's like you getting familiar, right? Because the third house deals with familiarity. And Gemini, it deals with the hands. The hands a lot of times are used as our way of getting information. We use our hands a lot of times to you know get information about what something is before we can develop language to talk about something, right? But third house familiarity, Gemini kind of use that as an extension of third house energy. So it's almost like, I almost feel like Uranus and Taurus, I mean Uranus and Gemini is gonna kind of wants you to get curious about certain things. It wants you to also, curiosity through your own, maybe your own experience, but also communication. Um, you know, being an outer planet, it's like also dealing with intellect and like, communication leads to new information. It's like there's going to be opportunities for you to take what you know and what you're already familiar with and allow like, almost like be a individual in how you communicate about it, right? I think this age is going to birth a lot of speakers and people who have ways of communicating concepts that we haven't seen before for real because of how they have grown to know the information that they know, right? And that's kind of like on a world stage scale. But then on a interpersonal scale, you know, being able to exchange information with those around you or those that you're connected to in a way that actually can, uh create change in others' lives or create change in your own life. It's like Uranus in Gemini. It's gonna change how we even go about information exchange. And I think like even when I think of Gemini too, I think of like a person's psyche as far as like the thoughts and feelings that they're familiar with. And I put feelings in there because it's like mentality is a mix of your thoughts and feelings, right? Usually your thought, if you sit with a thought long enough, you start to feel a certain way about it. So I kind of feel like with Uranus and Gemini, it's like this new life that you got to live, this new world that we're in, whatever your thoughts about it are, you need time to adjust to that. You're going to have to adjust to that new way of thinking, right? So it's going to be a little clumsy, it's going to be a little frustrating, but essentially, you know, and we're getting kind of like the first hint of that with the square that Uranus and Taurus is making with all of those that stellium in Aquarius. Even right now, I think it's Mercury right now. Matter of fact, I'm pull it up if you get what I'm saying. So a lot of this stuff is just how it's playing out, right? Okay. So a lot of this stuff we can already see. You know what I'm saying? A lot of this stuff we see right now, it's like Uranus right here, 27 degrees, right? It's making that square with right now Mercury and Venus, right? Soon to be the sun and then Mars later on. But it will eventually make a trine with Pluto. So this is kind of what I mean by like it's starting out as a little bit of a frustration because we're preparing ourselves to change the way we even handle information or what information we even working with. But it started in values. It's kind of like around our value, our sense of value, our self-esteem, right? Taurus, like I said before, material. So think about like how the world is collapsing right now in the sense of people are overworked. People are finding it hard to get a job, but then even finding it hard to justify keeping a job when you already when as soon as you get that job that's going to take up 40 hours of your week, you kind of low key got to get a part-time and maybe even have a couple side hustles and a couple of this and a couple of that, and you still probably can't get no apartment. Somebody did the math and they was like, the apartment, I think I forget the math, but it was like the apartment was maybe 25 or $2,700 a month, right? You got to make three times the rent. And it was like, that came out to what, 6,000 plus as far as, what he would have to make a month in order to be able to afford the apartment. And then and then when you look at the salary for that, it's just like, $100,000 damn near, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it don't even make sense right now. The finances don't even make sense right now. The math don't make sense. What they be saying, they be like, the math ain't mathing on any level. Nothing, the price of all things are completely skewed. So people are in a situation where no matter how hard you try, the material world is changing in such a way it doesn't make any sense. Everybody is kind of like class wise misplaced. And then there's even conversations about like oh, in the next couple of years there will be no middle class, right? And then it's this weird situation where it almost is like, well, the government has to step in at some point, and that's kind of like what y'all don't really want. Y'all don't want the government to come in and put everybody on like some kind of crypto system or like some kind of online banking system where they got to give you a stipend because there's not enough jobs available or there's not enough this or that. And going back to what I was saying about how the media shapes things and how you got to take things with a grain of salt, because how they speak about things isn't necessarily true. Like, for instance, on the news, you might hear, oh man, there's no more jobs, or the unemployment rate is this, or this is that. And see, again, you might look around and see certain examples to prove that, but you also have to kind of think like when they're reporting on something, just this is just how I think. Those who want solutions create solutions. Like a lot of times when someone's giving you information, but like for especially somebody who's a group of what they call themselves, it's like the government, right? They're trying to tell you, oh, we the government, we keep society running in a certain way and stuff like that. So you got to think to yourself when they are giving information to the public, if they wanted to find a solution, they would. These are the people who created the systems. So if at any time it created disruptions in the flow of society, if they wanted to, they could just change certain things to make the system. And maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I'm not even talking so much about them finding a solution or depending on them for a solution. But I'm just pointing out the fact that a lot of times the government presents situations to you, the people, as if they are responsible or they should be. My bad. Hold on. Got to get the Bibles in there. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the homies. You know what I'm saying? Still doing craftables and stuff like that. So if you want one, I'm working. I got to add some things to the website. But if you're looking to get you a custom craftable, just let me know. Send me an email at daybeyond95@gmail.com, and then we'll talk about the process. Basically, any photo you want to use, I could take that and 3D print it into a bobblehead or something like that that you could put on your desk or put in a trophy case and stuff like that. So anyway, quick little shameless plug. But yeah, when it comes to you know, again, like I said, I might be oversimplifying it because I'm not the most political person. I just look at what I know what I know, and I learn what I learn. Keep it moving. You know what I'm saying? I'm not here to convince nobody on either side of nothing. But y'all know, well, I don't know if y'all know my stance on certain things, but this shit a game. This shit is being, it's puppeteered. It's all a game. There's no point in y'all going back and forth trying to vote when, look at your job. You don't vote for who the next manager going to be. But they give you the illusion of democracy so that you feel like you have some power. The easiest way to manipulate a person is to make them feel like they have power in a situation they don't. In this, you know what I'm saying? Like make them think, man, a lot of y'all got kids and do the same thing to y'all kids that the government be doing to y'all. Where you tell your kid like, oh, if you do this, you got two choices, and like you give them two choices that both work in you as the parent favor, knowing damn well you ain't giving the kid any power, but you're giving them the illusion of choice so that they can feel empowered to just do what you want them to do. You do that to your own children, and you think the government ain't doing that to you when you go out and vote. Like, look, you know what I'm saying? It's like we got to think differently. And I think that's another thing with Uranus and Gemini, like thinking differently. Now, you also have to understand the powers that be, not the powers that be, fuck that. They don't have that much power. But the individuals that run the world, they know this stuff. They talk about it differently, but they know the same things. So they know Uranus, right, means that the collective is going to be changing their way of digesting information and giving information. So they're going to have their own version of what they want people to think about and do. So there again, like I said, the ramping up of tragedies or things to distract you are just ways that they can kind of pigeonhole you into thinking about certain things. It's a tragedy what's going on in them files. But if you get too pinned up on what's going on there, a lot of times you forget that you're also living through life as well, and you need to think about what matters in your actual circumference and what you need to do in order to keep yourself and the people around you moving forward to make some kind of change that can matter. Because a lot of times, like it's tricky because when stuff like that happens, a lot of times it's a way to create new laws or new regulations or something like that on certain things right under our nose. So like the question becomes like again, the government poses it as like, look at this sick bastard. How could this be going on? But the government always painting someone else to be something. When a lot of times the government knows certain things going on and allow it. You know what I'm saying? They allow it. And then when it all comes out, they pose it as, look at this monster. And look at the people like, right? Isn't this person a monster? Isn't this group of people a monsters? And then they frame it as like, oh yeah, like I'm on y'all side. Matter of fact, we should create a law to ban that. You know what I'm saying? The law should be something where we can have access to, bad people like that's files. We should have access to that people like that's communication systems, right? You know what? Why don't we pass a law? Hey, the people, wouldn't you like a law that would allow us to regulate communications on a even deeper level and get more data and information on monsters like that? But see, you don't realize that they're framing it a way to convince you to allow them to do something that's going to basically be the reason why you're under surveillance 24/7. Your all forms of communication is now, again, before it was like, oh yeah, people might be tapped into the phones, but it's not enough people in the world to keep track of what everybody talking about. It's not, it's, you know what I'm saying? If I'm not even doing nothing on the phone, there's not enough people in the world to really go through everybody's conversation. Plus, the laws didn't allow that. Now, again, all this new technology, it's like it's nothing. AI can go through all, you know what I'm saying, however many billion people in the world, if they were all on the phone at the same time, AI done got to a point. It's like if you put a couple AI systems, it can come up, it can get information about all conversations and then organize it, synthesize it, put it in a way where it can categorize what's a threat, what's not a threat. And again, not because it's a human deciphering this, but just a computer taking certain words, whether it's in context or out, and then putting you in a group and all of a sudden you got a target on your back because you said a couple buzzwords and the computer system said, this person's a threat. So now we're knocking on your doors, treating you like Epstein, treating you like a monster, treating you like this or treating you like that. Again, my fault. This was supposed to be astrology, I promise. But this is the type of stuff that kind of like, again, change, chaos, and a lot of times, amidst the chaos is where you get hit with the okey doke because you're not even considering stuff like this. But this be the very foundation of why we still in the situations we in now, as far as society goes. Um, on an interpersonal level, though, you know, your values are changing. What you value is been changing, but now it's time for you to start to engage with that in a certain way. You know what I'm saying? 27 degrees, right here at 27. It's cuspy anyway. So it's already some forms of Gemini in there where, starting to speak up about what you value, I think is important right now. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if the people around you don't get it, you have to kind of be shamelessly yourself. And this adds to the theme of, it being a 1 year and a lot of energy in what you call it in Aries with Neptune in there and then Saturn on its way. Saturn 29 degrees. So, it's some intense energy right here in this beginning half of the zodiac, what I'm saying? But collectively it's just like really like to me this kind of speaks to just an awakening of who you are, right? And I think that at the crux of it is kind of what you're going to see. You're going to see people who know who they are, and so they can speak with confidence, conviction, and self-esteem. Then you're gonna see people who don't really know who they are, and when they speak, it's gonna almost feel like it's gonna be easy to spot. Like, I don't believe you. Like, it's gonna not be believable, and it's also gonna not actually be. It's gonna kind of sound like a regurgitation of what somebody else was saying. versus a person's own language. And I think that's kind of what the foundation of Gemini is. Gemini is the first air sign. So it's kind of like the foundation of what is to be your language, right? Your form, it goes into the seventh house, which is the form of relating. And then it becomes a thought process. It becomes a system. It becomes a fixated thought, an idea. So it starts out it starts out with you just putting the forms of communication together. It's like starts with gathering your thoughts almost. So this is going into an age of questioning, well, are your thoughts your own? Now, that's another conversation too, because thoughts and feelings are not us until we decide that we agree or disagree with something. Then you start to adopt the thought to be your own and you can shape it, right? This is kind of like on a spiritual level, kind of what happens. A lot of times we receive a bunch of shit all day and night. And see, that's kind of also a point being made with Uranus going into Gemini. The retrograde should have taught you how important it is to filter the information you're receiving and not just allow mass consumption of a bunch of scattered bullshit. And I even think that's reflective of how the algorithms have transformed. One thing I see happening too with Uranus and Gemini is like what really what's going on now, what's been going on is what you're going to see is an increase of this already been going on, but it's going to be an increase. It's going to get worse. People are basically being locked into echo chambers with the things that they consume online because the algorithm is so good nowadays. You could as soon as after a couple swipes or scrolls, you are locked into a echo chamber of content that's just going to agree with your thought process unless you actively looking at information that kind of is a little bit outside of your range. Like there's a way to do this that can actually make you smarter, but what you're going to see is a lot of people doing this to become more uh stupid and less connected to reality because these little echo chambers online, if you're chronically online, you become more and more consumed by the echo chamber. So when you go out into the world, you think that the world thinks how you think. So you might start to see people get into weird, awkward situations where they get out into the world thinking that, again, they working and operating with an echo chambered mind. They start to communicate and then people disagree or people, so that could lead to clashes, dramatic ones or less dramatic ones. Whether it ends in a person feeling awkward about themselves or like, oh, like I didn't know, feeling stupid, or it leads to actual conflict, like people getting hurt because there's too many people that disagree or people that have a skewed view of the world and even how to interact with other human beings. Now, I don't think that's extreme. That's extreme. But if you watch some of those videos, like even how people talk, it's situations that have been set up. And see, that's another thing too. It's like it's hard to have a lot of empathy or with certain things. Um, well, no, that's not even the case. But like even with the ICE situation, man, like if you really think about it, bro, it's fucked up how they did that because they got regular people to sign up for something because they knew people were struggling. So they got regular people to sign up to be ICE, right? Now, some people had the intent of whatever the fuck, the bullshit that ICE be on. Some people had that intent going in, maybe, but a lot of it was people seeing the government using people's situation, poverty or whatever. Like some people just needed a check. They use that against folks, right? And they got regular people dressed up in this attire to basically be the face of terrorism to go around and now put them in danger, direct danger, because the public and the people are being hurt. It's like, damn, like, when you see how people are reacting to ICE agents, right? And I'm not showing sympathy for ICE. I'm just saying, think about how fucked up that is. They put people in these uniforms who are probably trying to find a way to feed their family. Right now, their choice to do that to feed their family is questionable. But it's the same thing as people who decide to sell drugs to poison the community in a certain way. again, a system that wanted people to be safe and protected and stuff wouldn't even create a dynamic like that. It wouldn't bait people like that to be set up to now be on the front lines of danger. So it's like you see how the government created a situation, a dynamic where its people are killing its own people, to where a person in that uniform, you're not even thinking they're a real person. You're just trying to hurt them. But now you create a trauma response from the people in those suits to now become aggressive to the. That's how people get killed. And then again, certain things you start to realize be connected to, where certain people, although real people get hurt, but certain people are planted to become the crisis actor in a situation or to be the sacrifice. Again, you seen those files or a glimpse of them. You was on them Illuminati videos when you was 12. Sacrifice. You think it's a bunch of people in robes in a dark room with candles and a big old vat, and they're sacrificing somebody like that. No, it beats events on the news. We make sure everybody know this person's name. They were shot by agents, and we want you to feel some kind of way about it. Everything is about making you feel something about it. Because if they can get you in fear and then they can get you trapped in doing something in their system and you pass away with all that on your heart, they won. That's energy they siphoned. Yes, got them. Got another soul. Because if you understand the deep spirituality behind it, you know, oh, they coming right back. Got their ass. They coming right back. So it gets deep. That's why like as much that's why I always be saying like although stories on the I'm not saying don't although it's not a bad thing to understand what's going on in the world, but do not confuse yourself with the events of the world unless you have a plan for that. And when I say a plan, I don't mean protesting in the streets. I mean you are intelligent, you know yourself enough to know how you're going to go about trying to impact change or affect the government in that kind of way. Some people are built to become part of the system and like go that way and try to influence from the inside. Some people try that route. Some people are, intelligent enough to know how to group people together. And through grouping people together, they come up with a good plan to kind of offset some of what the government is doing, or maybe they get with their community and start helping people on the ground level. Many different ways to do a revolution, right? If that's what you want, there's many different ways to do a revolution, but the way that I think is the most just pointless is for you to join some kind of protest. You let the government tell you how to be a revolutionary, or you know what I'm saying? You let the go, hey, you can protest as long as you do it from 5 to 7, 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. in this area, and only this capacity of people with these kind of signs. Like that ain't doing nothing but wasting your time, you know. And again, like how I'm speaking about, like my method is this, my solution is this. We have to create an alternative through community building, real community building, right? Community building that's so tight, it's even if it's a bunch of subset communities, because that's what the internet has become. But we find ways to partner with each other and we create an alternative way, right? Self-sustainability. We start to create we start to instill the skills to be self-sustainable, right? And then we learn how to commune with one another in such a way in which we don't have to rely and depend on any kind of outside external system. We can create our own ecosystem in a way, you know what I'm saying? And again, easier said than done, and long-term vision. And also, I don't feel like the world spiritually is mature enough to really conduct that in a way that is going to work just yet. I still believe in certain things, and again, these are conversations that got to happen off camera, in person, with the right people. You know what I'm saying? But I've seen things, and I got visions and stuff like that. I got imagination that works at that capacity. So you know what I'm saying? But I ain't gonna spill the beans right now. We got work to do. Essentially, that's what I get from this energy. We got work to do. And again, what I was saying also reigns true about this year is not about settling into anything. So whatever vision I got or whatever vision you got, just understand like this is not the year to do that, but it is the year to make progress, to go the distance, to start to see yourself as the shooting star and start to become more yourself to the point where you shine in a certain way that when it is time, you're going to be a beacon of light that connects to the next person that's a beacon of light, right? And us together can change the world. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to come from one person, but it's going to come from people knowing themselves. And the best thing you could do for the people around you is to be the inspiration, to be the example, right? Not for them to follow suit behind you, but for you to give them the idea that it's possible to be something else. It's possible to, oh, wait, hold on, I could elevate like that. I could become more myself and stuff in some magnitude, right? But one interesting thing I do see is that a lot of these communities that you see that y'all used to be all buddy buddy with, you starting to see like the people behind these things. A lot of folks don't know what to do. So a lot of y'all, you got to check yourself. You got to make sure you're not following nobody who is presenting themselves like a false prophet because you just following behind a bunch somebody else's. This is why I was so adamant about Neptune in Aries, even Saturn getting into Aries. You have to think for yourself. You have to believe in yourself. You can't just follow suit no more. We out of that Pisces shit where it was like, oh, well, this person makes me feel empowered, so I'm gonna believe everything they say. Yes. No, you know what I'm saying? That's not the way. This is, and if you don't see it now, I guarantee by July, you're gonna be like, damn, this community some bullshit. Or the person I've been following, some bullshit. Not everybody. I mean, there's some real people out there, but it's like, it comes down to, but still, you need to find your own voice. You need to find your own vision. You can still support somebody. And again, being a part of community is not just follow, like, people think community is sacrificing their own goals, desires, and adopting somebody else's mission. No, community is like Aquarian energy. We all individuals with our own mind, but we're committed to a shared thought and idea. I think somewhere down the line, people started to want to blend because a lot of times these communities attract people who are broken and hurt and are needing and desperate of something to be a part of. You know what I'm saying? The outcasts and the abandoned and all the, you know what I'm saying, which is cool, but and like you can't blame somebody for not knowing that they supposed to kind of find their own voice. You can't, it's like even if it's a group of broken people, it's like sometimes the point of community gets lost in translation, where that community was supposed to be there to support your own personal growth. And then as you grow, you contribute to the community to help it grow, right? But a lot of what you started to see was people becoming dependent on it and treating it's the same thing as like a person getting into astrology, but treating it like religion. It's supposed to be an alternate system, a tool, but you come in with that dogma from what you used to know and place it on a new thing. And like again, that's a normal thing to do, but that's not the right thing to do. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times that's a very natural thing people would do. They'll take what they was in and then dump it on it. It's the same thing getting into a new relationship and you take old baggage. It's understandable why you would do that, but that's not the right way to go about that. And you're gonna damage that new relationship. So when you take old dogma, old ways of thinking and try to place it into some new context, that's when you usually experience the most turmoil because it don't work like that. But people are so afraid. So they rather sit with the unfamiliar, they rather sit with the comfortable or the familiar hell than to be uncomfortable for a little bit until they get a new happiness, a new world, until they build a new world. They rather take the old shit and just try to like justify it, you know. But yeah. Today in particular though, the moon in Virgo is helping a little bit with this Uranus energy, just us to emotionally understand, this is dealing with the details. So we see the details of what probably needs to change. So, don't get too anxious about it. Just accept it as, okay, that's the work. And once you commit to the work, it gets easier. Now, last thing I'm gonna talk about is some of these squares. So squaring Mercury. So changing how you think about your values and the values that you're associated with, right? Changing what you like and the things that you want, changing your wants based upon understanding or a clearer view of your values, and changing low key, also changing how you think about what you want, right? Eventually it's going to change how you act and how you see. But it's a learning process. So you're learning how to think differently about what it is you want by dealing with your values and kind of like analyzing those things, the things that you used to want versus the things you want now, what you used to value versus what you value now, right? Again, all these things pass through Pluto. Pluto is like Pluto right here. After this stellium, eventually Uranus will be right here in the beginning of Gemini, and it'll trine with Pluto, meaning that there's actually a gift in this. So you might not see it now, but you changing how you think is going to lead to you being able to have a more harmonious transformation mentally about what it is that you're embarking on, where you're transforming, also where you're placed in terms of community or the public in some kind of way, because Pluto deals with Aquarius. So just like there's chaos going down below, there's also chaos as far as individuals who's running the world and stuff like that. That's why they're using chaos as almost like a tool or manipulation tactic to get people so distracted that they're not thinking about what they're trying to change. So if you're not focused on trying to change and having a new way to think, the government will provide a way to think for you by what they produce on the news and things like that, and what they present to you as stories that matter, right? And then these both of these energies on a sextile Neptune and Saturn in Aries, which is an opportunity, right, for you to have your sense of self be the driving force to what the new information it is that you not only transform it into, but also have the capacity to share. So leaders are being birthed right now. The next generation of leaders, the next individuals who about to push the limit, and then a lot of formidable forces too, people who are going to find themselves in certain ways that, again, these things are going to either support greatness, support things that y'all want to see built, or it's going to be things used against you. um so right now, don't get distracted, especially if you're working towards some kind of goal or dream for yourself. Right now the best thing you could do is just kind of honor yourself by being very mindful and intentional about the information that you're pursuing. Um, you know, it's a lot of things changing, but I really just wanted to make this as a quick update video, giving y'all some context with Uranus going direct and what to kind of, expect, because it is an energy that shakes things up. But, really think about it like this, like, even though Uranus is there, it's still in Taurus. So you have to find a way to ground a lot of the changes, like in the sense of making it make sense for your story, right? So the more you can tap into who you are, this change that happens, right? Again, it might come in the area of finances, things that affect your physical world, your material world, or your self-esteem regarding the things that you can secure. It might make you feel insecure or unstable, but you have to ground yourself, understand that, the power is still in your hands. It's just you might have to change your method, and that change of method is gonna actually push you into a better way to gain control of a situation the way you supposed to, the way that's right for you. But you have to really trust the process in this case, right? So anyway, that's all I got. Right on time too. I don't know what that ad was, but anyway, right on time. Much love, and I will catch y'all on the next one. Peace.